And actually, we need to ultimately be more probabilistic rather than deterministic. I'll explain the difference. So, in many cases, human beings are wired to be deterministic. And when I say deterministic, if this happens, then this must be the reason, or this is the result. And we're wired this way for survival. I mean, you think about it. If you're on the savannah and you see some wild animal or a tiger, you don't have time to kind of think, wow, I wonder if that tiger's friendly or not, or maybe we can be friends, right? You just run. So this kind of instant response. But in this new world that we're in, things are not so black and white. And is a competitor, or are they a potential partner? Can you be partners with them sometimes and competitors with them in other markets? Is this series of events happening going to be good or bad for the business? What's the right ethical decision to make in this scenario? And what you realize in a world of increasing levels of uncertainty, ambiguity, and lots of data is that we need to be able to update our beliefs as we get more information. This is called being probabilistic. So in a key business decision, you may only be 70% sure. Now, you need to ask yourself, at what point, at what level of certainty can I act? So is this a decision where I need to be 90% sure, or is 50% okay? And as you get more information, does that make you more or less certain? So that way, as new data comes in, you're updating your views, not trying to look to see whether they fit your thesis or theory about reality.
So is that more like risk? You say risk aversion in the book, right? Having machines and algorithms predict based on prior events. Is that correct?
No, it's more about our mindset to change and uncertainty. If you're somebody who, as you say, tends to look for data to fit your view, you're actually someone who can't handle uncertainty very well. You've got your idea about the way things should be, and you're looking for data to support it. But if you're more open to ambiguity, you're actually seeing more data as a way of changing your views, or seeing whether you're being ready to move and adjust. There was the head of engineering at Airbnb. He was talking about the kinds of people that he likes to hire. And he says, in the end, I look for people that are comfortable with ambiguity, highly tolerant of ambiguity, because those kinds of people are the people who, as things are constantly changing, see it as a challenge. They don't see it as a threat. They actually embrace the uncertainty of events.
Now, why do you think so many people see machines and big data as threats, as opposed to something that's going to create more jobs, lower the cost, improve our way of living? Why do you think that is?
We've always, I think, as human beings, been fearful of the very tools we have ourselves built. If you look at it, for hundreds of years, actually right back to the ancient Greeks, they even had an idea, almost this idea of robots, or golems, or things that are inanimate coming to life, threatening us. And if you look more closely, though, we don't always need to be trying to prove that we're better than our machines. You think about John Henry, trying to, take on the mechanical system, because human beings co-evolve with technology. So as we get better tools, we realize that our value is staying one step ahead of the tools, because the tools allow us to do things we couldn't do before. We don't have to go back to a world without computers, or without typewriters, or without hammers, or without machine learning and automation. So all of these things just allow people to focus on what's really important and what's really of value. So the question we have to ask ourselves is not, will technology destroy jobs? The key question is, how will technology change jobs? How does it change what it means to be valuable? How does it change what it means to be an effective leader? And that's actually something that's speeding up now, because the rate of improvement is growing so exponentially. We have to be prepared as leaders to be constantly re-educating, retraining, and resetting our expectations about where we can add the most value. And that's why I'm really excited about the future, because there's so many things we do every day which human beings shouldn't do. Administrative, routine, transactional tasks. actually our real job is not to work. Our real job is to design work. So we should be every day going to work going, how can I destroy my own job? Is there a way that I can leverage technology that means that my job today doesn't need to exist? Now, you might think, why on earth would you be so crazy to do that? And it's actually because in that moment, you are showing how valuable you are as a human being, because you are designing systems that scale up your function, which means that was actually your whole job in the first place.
Do you think that's at the core of most tech leaders' purpose, is to make life easier, to make sure we don't have to work one day?
I don't think it's on enough leaders' agenda. I think for too long, technology and technology investment has been flowing into these micro conveniences that suit sort of the West Coast, San Francisco tech entrepreneurs, right? So there's sort of a bubble in Silicon Valley about people looking for these little micro shared economy conveniences. And I think the futility of that was really made clear in 2020, because despite the fact it's been 100 years since we have had to deal with a mass pandemic like this, you go back to the images of 1918, and aside from the black and white, it's shocking how similar they are. We still have signs up saying stay away from each other. We're still wearing the same kind of masks. We're still using the brute, blunt tool of quarantine, to deal with this. And what that shows you is that despite all of the technological advances, we've spent too much time on things that probably don't matter that much, like social media, like games, like, micro transactions, micro apps that really maybe bring small conveniences, but they haven't fundamentally improved our logistics, our ability to develop new medicines, our ability to really drive health results and outcomes.
Well, what would you like to see then? And what are some developments that have come from the recent pandemic?
Well, we used to talk about digital disruption, as a concept. And people used to believe that to be a digital disruptor, there had to be something different about you. I don't know, like somehow only if you worked at a company like Airbnb and Uber, there was something magical in the coconut water in their offices, right? That gave you the ability to be a disruptor. Then 2020 arrived, and we realized that there's no longer any such thing as digital disruption. There's just being in business or not in business. We all had to become disruptors. If you were digital, it wasn't special anymore. You were just finding a way to still deal with your customers. So I think what's become very clear is that every business, every industry, every leader has no longer the luxury of time to wait on digital transformation. But it's no longer that special anymore. It's just the price of doing business. Now, the interesting question is, what is real disruption? What can we do now that we could never have done before we lived in a world of machine intelligence? How do we think beyond just creating a digital channel for customers to deal with us, and think, how do we fundamentally reimagine the experience for our customers, whether you're a store or a healthcare provider or an insurer or someone in logistics and transportation? I think what's this made clear is that we now need to really tap into our imagination.
Well, let's go there then. Let's hypothesize a little bit, Mike. What does the future of work look like to you? And when someone says future of work, how far out is that?
Well, let me tell you, the future of work is a lot more than Zoom.
Of course. And this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I think people got very excited realizing that they could now do video conferencing. I was doing some research on this, and I came across a picture from 1930. It was an early prototype video conferencing booth from AT&T, 1930. In fact, even in 1960, they had this technology. They've been trying to push video conferencing, for almost the last 90 years, long before the internet. And the thing about it is that the technology itself is not really the important part. the important part is, how do we find a new way of working? Because what we've done now is terrible. We've just taken all our bad practices from 2019. Think of all of the endless meetings you were stuck in. And now we've just moved them onto a screen with a camera that's constantly watching your face.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why people have this sense of anxiety, because you're like in this panopticon of being constantly watched and, having to deal with your resting Zoom face, like, what's my expression at all times? So I think what we need to figure out as we start to go back to the office, the question is not, should we work at home or should we work at the office? The question is, does it matter where we are? Can we find a way of working that's location independent, that it doesn't require us to sit through endless video calls, but there's sort of a seamless interchange between how we interact with other people in our organization, whether they're in the head office, whether they're at home, whether they're a full-time person or they're a freelancer. Like, how do we better design the ecosystem of talent in our organizations, and also design around that new ways of tracking work, running projects, documenting decisions. And this is what I think people miss, is that this 2020 crisis has just broken the mold, but we're a long way yet from rebuilding the organization of the future.
Now let's just pause for a second, Mike, and just remember that we are only human. And I don't know if you agree with this quote, but technology is only adopted at the rate of trust. So if we're going to get to where you're saying we're going to get to, and if we're going to follow this reverse engineering methodology that you kind of lay out in the book, how can a leader listening to this hypothesize and then work backwards to achieve a result?
I think the starting point for any leader is to start with a clean sheet of paper and say, okay, at every level of this organization, from the way I deal with my customers, to the way I deal with my partners, to the way I deal with my team, and even what I do myself, what is the new smart way of doing things? Is there a better way of doing this? And what does this crisis teach me about the future that I had not paid attention to? I mean, that to me is almost the daily reflection that leaders need to focus on, because even at the level of the people around you, the people that are handling this crisis best in your team are the people you want to keep close to you in the future, because we are going to live in a decade of radical change, not just crisis like the one we're in now, but this process of constant reinvention and reflection is going to be something that the best people are going to be good at. So I think that for me is really the starting point. And this is the future of work is going to be a journey. It's not a template or a blueprint, and it's not going to be the same for everyone.